Welcome back to HQ. It is certainly going to be interesting to see how that 12-team playoff bracket sorts itself out when it's all said and done. Here's what it looks like right now. If the playoffs were to get started today, it would be Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State with byes. And then as you see there, 4 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams. Wow. And Notre Dame is in right now as well, too, even with that loss to Northern Illinois on their resume. Let's see if I can get my words out better as I bring in a couple of experts to talk about college football here. We've got the host of the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson, and our betting analyst, Mackenzie Brooks. There's a lot of chaos that could happen this weekend, some trap games potentially as well. And we're going to start with a game that Chip and the Cover 3 crew actually believes is a trap game. It's our Big Ten on CBS game of the week. Minnesota looking for their 3rd straight home win against Penn State, which is crazy to think about, especially the scenario with Penn State right now. Chip, I'm going to come to you first, though, when we talk about the scenario, because Penn State, they're in right now. They're that 6th seed looking at Georgia at the minute. What could a loss do this weekend, though, to disrupt that? How important is this game going to be for the Lions?
It's huge. 2 reasons. Number 1, a loss drops them down to where they're going to be on the chopping block. They will, without a doubt, be one of the teams that is considered by the committee for the final spots, but they're not going to have a really strong resume to be able to lean on. And so if the committee decides that they want to value a team's wins over the loss count, well, Penn State, in terms of the quality victories, I mean, that Illinois win is going to be doing a lot of work. It's also going to be bad because some of those other teams around them might have an opportunity to impress the committee in the Big Ten championship game. A loss to Minnesota bounces Penn State from being able to make the Big Ten championship game. And yes, we do think it's a little trappy because, as you mentioned, 2019, a top 5 Penn State team goes to Minneapolis and loses to PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers. If history repeats itself again, Penn State's going to find itself on Selection Sunday feeling much more nervous than they would be if they were a 1-loss team.
It's interesting because when you look at odds makers right now, they're implying around 3.5 Big Ten teams right now, and that half could go to 3 or go to 4 dependent on what happens with Minnesota and this game and dependent on what happens with Indiana as well. It's funny, Minnesota is one of those teams where it's like, I have no business in the college football playoff, but like, how can I make this about me? Like, how can I ruin other people's day and make this about me? And you know what? They could do it. They very well could, like Chip said. Now, if you do like Minnesota to win this game, and I would never call you crazy for thinking so, instead of taking that plus money line, what you could take instead is Penn State to miss the playoffs at around plus 520, because that'll pay out really pretty. Now, that's not me saying that, but if you are a Minnesota believer, if you're riding that train and love the chaos, that's probably a little prettier ticket for you.
That was music to Chip Patterson's ears there. You heard the reaction. It's interesting, too, when we talk about Penn State, because the James Franklin experience, too. What is his status going to look like if things don't work out for him? A lot to pay attention to. We're going to get into that matchup this Saturday at 3 o'clock on our Big Ten on CBS pregame show. So make sure you join us for that over on CBS Sports HQ. Let's move to another game that's kind of interesting this week. Ole Miss has been in the headlines a lot lately, whether it was them getting that big win, unfortunately, over your Georgia Bulldogs a couple of weeks ago. Even lately, Lane Kiffin saying that he kind of doesn't want to play in the SEC championship game because of the college football playoff implications. And now they've got to face DJ Lagway and the Florida Gators, who, by the way, are 1 game away from being bowl eligible. Like, did we think we were going to say that about Florida at the beginning of the season? So, Chip, that being said, there's a lot to consider with this matchup here. Give us the chaos scenario between these 2 teams this weekend.
The chaos scenario is that Florida gets to take down the coach who everyone wanted to replace Billy Napier. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Florida fans were totally out on the Billy Napier era, and they just had little heart eyes looking at Lane Kiffin. But then they would leave the swamp. If Florida is able to pull off this upset victory, they would leave the swamp with immaculate vibes, because you think you've got the right coach, you think you've got the right quarterback, and you were just able to show to that head coach over there at Ole Miss that being at Ole Miss ain't like being at Florida, a place where you can win SEC championships, a place where you can win national championships. It is a vibesy play as all get out, but we have seen Ole Miss play down to the competition before. It burned them against Kentucky. It would not surprise me if in this noon spot on the road coming out of a bye, maybe Ole Miss gets got again.
Florida's an interesting team to me from the grand scheme of things because they are the common opponent between Ole Miss, between Tennessee, and between Georgia. And those are three teams we've talked about, maybe being on the bubble, maybe not making the SEC championship. So the way those three teams perform against Florida could end up saying a lot about your chances to make the college football playoff here. We talked about Georgia. I mean, the box score says it was a pretty easy win. Some of us know some cards fell in our favor in that, Tennessee, they barely came out of that win. So if Ole Miss can dominate this team, that puts them in a really good spot when you're comparing their resume to someone like Tennessee and someone like Georgia. Now, the other thing Florida can do, again, not a team looking to be a part of the playoff. They're just along for the ride, but they could affect a lot of things. Miami at the beginning of the year put a smackdown on this team, okay? So that helps makes the ACC look competitive if they killed a team that is competitive with the top of the SEC. So it's like this full circle where Florida is not part of the college football playoff by any means, but they're such an important piece of the puzzle when we talk about seeding and talk about rankings here.
Isn't it so weird how the conversations that we have at the beginning of the season end up coming back and being completely different than what we expected? Chip, I did want to ask you, I feel like we got a lot of opinions about Lane Kiffin and his comments on the SEC championship. When I first heard it, I was a little confused because covering the SEC, that's the pinnacle, right? That's what every team wants to play in. So when you heard Lane Kiffin, I'm curious your initial thoughts and just hearing him explain it, what you took from it.
Number one, I was repulsed. But I do think that he wasn't saying it like he means it as much as he was trying to expose where we're at right now, where the whole idea of the first round bye, the way the playoff seeding is set up, there are a lot of people. Mackenzie, too, has looked at the 5 seed as maybe being the best position in the bracket. Then would you be motivated to not win your conference championship game? So I think that what Lane Kiffin was really doing was trying to expose how silly the current college football playoff bracketing format is. But initially, I hate it because I think that Kirby Smart has said he would rather win an SEC championship than a national championship. To me, college football's history is based on winning your league and being the best in your league. There's in college basketball, a lot of ACC fans have felt that way for a very long time. I just think that you should take real pride in being the big dog on your neighborhood block. And so I don't love the way it was presented. But I think sneaky Lane Kiffin was really just trying to prove a point about how ridiculous it is that it would help you to not make a conference championship game when you should be trying to win every single game and your league.
We all know Lane Kiffin's gamesmanship and the way he kind of presents things can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So I love that point. Thanks for sharing that with us, Chip. I want to go to another spoiler chaos scenario over in the Big 12 because OMG, I remember this time last year when we were talking about Lance Leipold and the job that he did at Kansas and turning that program around. Now we're looking at a Kansas team that has the potential to upset another Big 12 contender here. They get Colorado. Of course, they knocked off Iowa State and BYU. So, Chip, when you look at this matchup between Colorado and Kansas this weekend, how nervous should Deion Sanders and his Buffs be for this matchup with Kansas?
I think that they should have all the anxiety needed to have total attention on what this Kansas team can do and what this Kansas team is trying to do. Because one thing Colorado has done over the course of this season during the recent winning ways that's gotten them in Big 12 title contention is they have improved defensively. They do a good job of stopping the run, and they do a good job of getting after the passer. But here's the problem. Kansas has an awesome rushing attack with Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels playing a role in that. And Jalen Daniels is a very elusive quarterback who can get away from pressure. If they allow Jalen Daniels to extend the play with his legs, then I think that Jalen Daniels and the Kansas offense has a chance to put up a lot of points in this game. What's going to make Deion Sanders feel better is that Kansas's defense also gives up a lot of points. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are amazing, and I think the Buffs will be able to score as well. So the anxiety comes with the fact that this is a coin flip game. This is going to come down to 1 or 2 possessions, 1 or 2 drives in critical moments, and whether or not you're going to be the team to execute. I think that the Kansas Jayhawks, the way they have handled their business in this recent run, have the full attention of Deion Sanders and this coaching staff, because absolutely the Jayhawks could continue their giant slaying ways and knock Colorado out of the picture.
He calls it giant slaying. I call him Thanos. Like, they just decide when everyone disappears and they do it. Like, I said Minnesota maybe is trying to be the main character. I mean, Kansas, the Jayhawks, and I give it to them. The biggest pick-me team in college football right now. They're like, if I'm going down, you are all going down with me. Chip's talked about it before. This is a team that could help the Big 12 eat each other, and we don't get any Big 12 teams at all. Because if Colorado becomes a 3-loss conference team, do we really need a 3-loss conference champion in the college football playoff? And Kansas is leading the chaos in this whole situation. They are just going in and ruining days for everybody. It is so funny to watch. I'm enjoying it. But again, this is probably the biggest team in the college football playoff conversation that's not actually in the college football playoff conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we just talked about with Florida, right? The excitement of being the agent of chaos is maybe exciting for some of these teams who aren't going to get into the mix. Very interesting one that we'll have our eye on that one. Let's go to the ACC next. I know a lot of our CBS crew was in on the SMU Mustangs, sort of taking the ACC by storm, but man, they have really been impressive. They're still undefeated in conference play. But if we look at maybe who they're going to be facing potentially in that championship game, it's Clemson, right? A team that got blasted by Georgia to open the season. Nobody really thought anything about them, and now here they are in the conversation. They're sitting at 7-1. They got the Citadel this weekend, which we're kind of blowing by that one. But Mackenzie, I want to go to next weekend when it comes to that Carolina game in Week 14. There's a lot on the line there. A couple of implications for Clemson in the ACC game. They either need Miami to lose 1 or 2 of its final 2 games, or SMU loses its final 2 games. So break that down for us, Mackenzie. How important is not this weekend, but next weekend for Clemson?
Next weekend's huge. Obviously, like you mentioned, things out of your control need to happen. But if you can show that you can beat an SEC team, you can beat an SEC team comfortably that sits around 6th in the SEC, that proves you could be the 5th best team in the SEC if you were in the SEC. So not only does that elevate yourself, that elevates the entirety of the ACC and the level of play there. So if you could be 5th in the SEC, that means Miami or SMU hypothetically could be 3 or 4. You know what I'm saying here? So just them playing well. They were the first to knock the level of play for the ACC when they got killed by Georgia, but now ever since they've just been chomping away, and now they're just elevating the integrity of this conference back to a point where we could possibly see a runner-up from the ACC in the college football playoff.
Yeah, that's what I've got my eye on. The scenario that would be good for Clemson and good for the ACC is that SMU wins out, so they maintain that really sterling overall record, and Miami loses at Syracuse. Clemson, after beating up on South Carolina, then goes to beat SMU. That means that SMU is ranked as highly as possible going into the championship game. Clemson would then have a chance to get that automatic bye and a little bit of a boost in the rankings as well if they beat South Carolina. And that, to me, is the most likely path for a Clemson and 1 scenario. So that's it, Clemson fans. You just need to count on Syracuse.
Who would have thought Syracuse would be the saving grace of the ACC this season?
Just how we drew it up.
That's exactly how we all expected it to be. Man, college football has been so fun. I'm so glad we have both of you to keep us on track with all of these wild scenarios. Here's what we got on tap on CBS this weekend. We talked about it. Number 4, Penn State needing a win over Minnesota. The Golden Gophers have won 3 straight at home, though. Will the Nittany Lions be able to break that streak? It all gets started at 3:30 Eastern. Make sure you join us for the pregame show at 3 o'clock here on CBS Sports HQ.